stop the senseless attack, stop the brinksmanship, and maybe that would be good politics. Joining me now are Richard Wolff and Angela Rye. Thanks to both of you for being here tonight.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Rev.
Richard, this is a huge admission from Lindsey Graham. How's the president done fighting all this nonsense?
Well, it's not been easy, and I honestly think that there are times when he's struggled because, let's face it, they're only in Washington, all of them, senators, members of the House, only there for a temporary period of time. If you waste that time in this kind of politics, it may be good politics within the Republican Party, but it's not good politics if you're an elected official who wants to get stuff done. I think that's been deeply frustrating for this president. I think it's been frustrating for regular voters. That's why people are turned off Congress.
That's what I was going to say. It's not good for regular Americans. How about that? Beyond the politics.
Right, and that's what makes it bad politics in the end. That's why they failed in their #1 priority, because it looks like they're just playing politics as opposed to trying to get policy through.
And Angela, when you look at the record, I mean, Republicans did used to support a lot of things prior to President Obama that now they don't support. They backed health insurance mandates. They backed the DREAM Act, infrastructure spending. They had no problem with deficit spending under President Bush, and they were for cap and trade. Now, all of a sudden, they're against all of that because he's for it.
Yes, Rev, they are. And here we are, you know, partially into the 113th Congress, fresh off of a Congress that was the most inactive almost in history. And you would think at that point, just off of sheer pride and competition, this is the spirit of competition, you'd want to move some things along. But here we are in 2013, still playing hide and seek, cat and mouse, or any other childhood game, tag you're it, with the lives of the American people and our economy and our future competitiveness. At this point, not only can the Republicans not afford to do it, the lives that they're impacting can't afford the impact.
But I have to ask you this, Angela. You spend a lot of time on the Hill. I think the story here is not what they're doing, is that Lindsey Graham actually said it. I mean, for him to actually come out and say it, is he that clumsy or that arrogant? I mean, are you surprised that someone that has been around as long as Lindsey Graham would politically naive enough to think the public wouldn't be outraged to hear him say this is good politics?
Well, Rev, here's the problem, right? There are people in the Republican Party who wholeheartedly support that. There are people who read that this morning and stood up and cheered. You know, so it's not that he's not reaching a certain segment of society. He really is. Mitch McConnell said that he was hoping to make the president a one-term president. You just played a clip earlier with Boehner saying he rejects the word compromise. So this is not a concept that's lost upon, certainly not the Republican Party here in D.C. inside the Beltway, but definitely not some of the right-wing, far extreme parts of their base.
Richard, when you look at the fact that, let me put it this way, Media Matters. Media Matters asked Pulitzer Prize-winning historian Robert Caro about the right-wing media coverage of President Obama compared to how other presidents have been covered. This is what Caro said. I think today is something different. The venom, the absolute venom. Whatever we think is really underneath it all, it is something quite horrible. You realize the depth of the anti-Obama feeling.
Right. And this is someone who wrote about the civil rights era, and we all know how hot passions were in that period. But, let's just, even if we don't go back that far, let's look at President Bush, right? Because Republicans listening to our conversation will say, well, you guys hated President Bush, you demonized him. Well, right, but what happened to Ted Kennedy? Ted Kennedy, who had this long tradition, not just being an incredible liberal senator, but of getting things done. The big domestic achievement for President Bush, no child left behind. For all the criticism of it, Ted Kennedy stood with him at the signing, pushed the legislation through. That's how you get things done.
And many of us tried to work with it. But let me give you the contrast. The Republicans have blocked the American Jobs Act, blocked the DREAM Act, blocked health care for 9/11 First Responders Act, refused to raise the debt ceiling twice in 2011 and 2013, refused deal on automatic budget cuts, tried to block key cabinet appointees, held up appointment of 47 judicial nominees. I mean, I'd be in hardball time if I kept talking about what they blocked.
Right.
None of that was done with Bush. If it was something good for the country, even though a lot of us were adamantly opposed to Bush, people like Ted Kennedy said we have to work for the good of the American public.
Right. And look, even if you drop the rhetoric about what's good for the American people, they know, Republicans know, that this president, just take health care reform, which they adamantly opposed, this president was giving them their policy proposals back on a plate. That's not rhetoric. This was a Republican plan for health care reform. When you talk about entitlement reforms, when they talk about entitlement reforms, this president has put them on the table. They should take a good offer when they see it. That's what's perplexing about the Republican strategy. It's all short term and not saying, what can we get out of this president that maybe we wouldn't get out of another Democrat, or maybe we cannot wait for a Republican to add to. Get what they can now. They've dropped that and said, we're just going to take what we can, smash and grab, and see what happens in the next election.
Well, in fact, Angela, you know from working the Hill and running the Congressional Black Caucus, the president was putting things on the table that many of us were outraged, were angry.
That's right.
And no matter what he did, they turned it down till we stopped getting angry at him because they weren't going to take it anyway. I mean, they would have probably weakened them had they accepted some of the things, because many of us were saying, no, don't give them that. It didn't matter what he offered them, they wouldn't take it.
That's absolutely right. And now here we are in a situation a couple of years later where their governors are taking it. They're welcoming the help from Obamacare, right? And so here's the facts, Rev. You know, the modus operandi that the Republicans are now utilizing is highly problematic. It's not getting us anywhere closer to where we need to be. In 2008, the electorate overwhelmingly responded to change we can believe in because it seemed like this president had exactly what it took to make compromises happen, to ensure that he met people where they were, whether they were Republican, Democrat, or somewhere in between. And they are rejecting it, hands down. It just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make good. It's not good politics. I would ask Senator Graham to define good politics, but this may not be criminal obstruction of justice, but it certainly is political obstruction, and it has to stop.
Richard Wolff and Angela Rye, thank you for your time tonight.
Thanks,
Thank you, Rev.
Ahead, O'Reilly.